Okay, good afternoon, class. So let's start with today's lecture. In the previous lecture, we had seen what exactly uh, are the various types of non-malicious activities, non-malicious programming errors. We had read about buffer overflow, then incomplete mediation. Okay, so those were non-malicious. Basically, the intention was clear, but somehow the attackers found out some bugs in the program and used it against the system. In this case, in today's lecture, we are going to learn about the various targeted malicious codes. Targeted malicious codes are also malicious, but they have a predetermined target. Okay, they have the attacker knows about the target very well and carries out a concentrated kind of an attack. Okay, similar to your spear phishing. You are already aware of spear phishing now because we already covered that topic. The targets are predetermined, the targets are fixed, and the attacker carries out the attack against those targets. So in this case, the very first attack is salami attack. So what could be the target for this sort of an attack? When I'm talking about a target, it doesn't mean that you need to have the personal information of all the victims. Whenever I'm saying that you know about the target, it's nothing but you are clear about whom you want to target, right? For example, a pre-planned attack. Very well answered by Sagar. A pre-planned attack or a premeditated attack against a particular set of victims is what we call as targeted malicious code. So in this case, the very first type of attack is salami attack. We have already seen salami attack in the past. Okay, I'm just going to give you some quick case studies on salami attack. Then we will see what is a covert channel, and lastly, we are going to see what is a linearization attack. So these are the three topics which we have to cover in today's session, followed by OS security. Okay, so we will complete these three topics and then quickly jump to the next topic, which is operating system security. We've already seen how we can provide security to a program with the help of authentication and authorization. We have already seen the access control techniques. We have already seen what is Kerberos. We have already seen what is your single sign-on and federated identity management. So we have covered all those sections. We have already seen what is biometrics. So we are well aware with the authentication and authorization techniques. In the previous few lectures, we had already also seen a MAC, that is mandatory access control, and DAC, that is discretionary access control. So we are already aware of what are access controls. But those are all about program security. In this session, in this lecture, we are going to learn what exactly is OS security, how we can provide security to an operating system. Okay, so we are going to learn some concepts which we have already done, which you have already learned in your second year, I guess, in operating systems. You might have seen these concepts such as segmentation, paging. So we are going to revise those topics once again because they are of crucial importance whenever we are studying security with respect to operating systems. Okay, so let me give you a quick brief of today's structure. We are going to learn salami attack, then covert channel, and then we are going to see few examples on linearization attacks. Okay, followed by once we are complete with these three topics, I will start with the next set of topics, that is operating system security. Okay, don't worry, I will zoom in between whenever required. Okay, so operating system security, and that consists of these three sections: separation, memory protection, and access control. I'm not going to focus on access control much because we have already seen that in the past. I will focus upon these two steps, that is separation and memory protection. Okay, so let's get started with the very first topic, which is salami attack, that is a targeted malicious code. Now we all know what exactly is salami attack. Okay, kindly read it once, then I will give you a case study. I will show you a case study. What exactly happens when you take a very small amount of money from a lot of accounts? It is also called as rounding off attack. So in short, let's consider whenever salami is basically a small piece of meat, right? So it got its name from that particular term. Basically, when we cut very thin slices of the meat and accumulate them together, it basically turns out to be a large loaf of meat. So what exactly happens? Uh, Small sections of that particular piece of meat, when fused together, becomes a huge chunk of meat. Similar concept can be applied over here. Salami attack is nothing but taking out very small amount of currency or amount of money from one's account and depositing that into the attacker's account. How can this happen actually in real life? Any example in real life scenario? How can you carry out such an attack with or without the user knowing about it? Any examples? You can.
सर हम लोग अगर कहीं पे शॉपिंग वगैरह करने जाते हैं तो वहाँ पे अ, हम लोग एक्स्ट्रा चार्जेस ऐड कर सकते हैं
Hmm.
यूजर को बताए बगैर, लाइक सर्विस चार्ज या फिर हम लोग ऐसे
Service.
रैंडम ऐसे स्कीम अप्लाई कर सकते हैं जो यूजर को पता नहीं है.
Okay. But whenever you are talking about service charge, वो तो bill पे display हो जाएगा. So anything which is if you want the victim to be unaware of it, ओके तो आपको बिल पे डिस्प्ले नहीं करना चाहिए. फॉर एग्जांपल सर्विस चार्ज वगैरह अगर आप अप्लाई कर रहे हो तो वो बिल पे डिस्प्ले होगा. ओके सो सर्विस चार्ज क्या होगा कि बहुत बड़ा अमाउंट दिखेगा तो वो यूजर को समझ में आएगा कि कुछ ना कुछ डिडक्ट हुआ है. तो सर्विस चार्ज में नहीं बोल सकता उसको.
asking for donations or something, या फिर लाइक रिलीफ फंड्स के लिए, या फिर वैसा कुछ जिसके अंदर मतलब यूजर को पता नहीं रहेगा ऑथेंटिकेटेड है या नहीं, पर जैसे वो पे कर देंगे.
ओके बट अगेन इन दैट केस इट विल बी अ सब्सटेंशियल अमाउंट ना. बहुत बड़ा अमाउंट होगा तो वो सलामी नहीं रहेगा. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अभी you might have seen whenever you book a ticket on Book My Show, they give you an option. I'm not blaming any organization. I'm just giving an example. They basically give an option, add rupee one and rupee one single rupee, and that goes to some donation. Okay, but are we sure that this particular amount is going to a donation or not? I'm not doubting anyone's intention, but I'm just giving an example. It might happen that that particular 1 rupee is not actually going to the donation. It is basically, it might be getting deposited on someone's account, and that actually can be a substantial amount if we add up all the values extracted from each and every Book My Show user. You're getting what I'm trying to say. Basically deducting 1 rupee from each account, you're basically giving the option to the user whether he or she wants to donate or not. For example, if you donate that 1 rupee, whether it is reaching that particular destination or not, I am not aware, right? So this is what this is basically a genuine way of asking for money, but the attacker or any small organization can use this as a way of generating money in a illegitimate way. For example, I'm sure Book My Show will be obviously sending that amount to the donation, but if any other third party application comes up 3 days from now, 1 month from now, and you're using that particular application to do some transaction, and they are asking for some money, it might be a service charge or whatever, as Jagdish said. But if that money is not actually getting deposited to the actual destination, where is it going then? It is going to someone's account, some illegitimate bank account, or somewhere else. So that is where salami attack comes into picture. For example, you might have seen many offers are given 99.9 rupees. For example, 99 rupees. You're not even bothered about that one extra rupee. You can get this particular item for 3,999. So what exactly happens whenever that particular transaction is shown in the bill? You might skip that 1 rupee. What exactly happens is whenever your bill comes out to be something around, for example, 13,998 or 999, whatever it may be. So, for example, something like this, 92, something like this. What exactly happens is the automated machine which is present at the cashier at that time will round off to the nearest upper value or nearest ceiling value. So what this basically is converted is something like this, 999. So what happens is the machine is not capable of handling the 8 paisa, because nowadays paisa is not transacted in actual economic transactions, actual financial transactions. Paisa is not used. So what happens is that extra 8 paisa is getting deposited to the if you are visiting a mall, then it is getting deposited to that mall's account. So what happens? You are getting this extra 8 paisa from one account. Just imagine hundreds of people are visiting that particular mall during the day. Okay, so at the end of the day, what happens, that extra 8 paisa is getting accumulated, and that turns out to be, for example, 25,000 at the end of the day. I'm just giving a vague figure. So you can imagine that extra 8 paisa per user is getting added up. That is what we call as rounding off. Why? because that extra 8 paisa is not noticeable. You are not even noticing that extra 8 paise ka transaction here and there. So what happens, that extra 8 paisa gets added up for a single user. For example, one user is visiting that billing counter after you. He might be having a transaction of extra 40 paisa. So again, that 40 paisa gets added up to that 8 paisa, and this process keeps on continuing. And at the end of the day, for example, you might be making a revenue. I am calling it revenue because it's extra amount. It's a profit. Okay. So you are incurring this much profit at the end of the day without even the need to pay extra taxes. So getting what I'm saying, this extra amount is not taxable in fact. So you are getting that extra amount into your account, into your illegitimate account, you can say. And at the end of the month, you will be having lakhs of rupees in that account. This is how salami attack takes place. Okay. So whenever you're buying something, kindly pay attention to the proper bills. If you are paying through card, then it's of utmost importance because cards can be used for transactions even using pesas or micro cents, right? In US, they talk in terms of cents. In India, we are talking in terms of pesos. So whenever you're transacting through a card, make sure that if this is your actual amount, make a habit, tell the cashier, deduct only this much. Okay, don't go for rounding off. You have the liberty. You can ask them to avoid rounding off. So basically, you are saving 8 paisa from your hard-earned money. Okay, this is how salami attack can take place. Any doubts with this? Anything you wish to add into it? In the meantime, let me open this particular case study for you. Okay, this is a simple case study that actually had happened. I have taken the example from some situations like this only. Okay, see over here. This was just an article about taken from an interview. I'm just reading out this particular part. Imagine you have 2,75,233 in your account. If someone steals, say, rupees 3 or 4 from your account every day, would you get an alert? No, because alerts are generally raised when a huge amount is deducted, or you can even set the rate, set the amount after which you should receive an alert. For in my case, the default is 1,000 rupees. So what happens is if someone does any transaction below 1,000 rupees, I may not even receive any transaction alert. So what happens is if per day 3 or 4 rupees are getting deducted from my account, I won't even notice that particular thing. When I will notice that at the end of the month, whenever I will receive the transaction slip or whenever I will receive the account statement, then I will come to know that so and so amount has been deducted from my account on a regular basis. But at that point of time, it will be too late to carry out any investigation because by then the amount would have been transferred to the attacker's account. So it would be too late to react in that situation. So what you can do is, as a safeguard, as a safe measure, you can set transaction limits to a very low amount. For example, 50 rupees, or even lower than that. For example, 1 rupee. So even if a transaction of 1 rupee happens from your account, you would get a transaction alert either through email or through SMS. Clear? So this is the very next thing that you should do whenever you will be having a transaction account. Savings account is okay, fine. If you are having a salaried account, then this is the very first thing that you should do. Put your transaction alerts to a very low level so that even if 1 rupee is getting transacted from your hard earned money, you get an alert immediately. Clear? Is there any doubt regarding this salami attack? Is it clear? Can I move ahead? I have actually elaborated on this particular section of salami attack. I guess the example was well enough. Kindly let me know if you want any more further explanation on this. Kindly acknowledge.
No, sir, we understood.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's move ahead with the next session or the next topic, which is covert channel. So all what we are doing is we are discussing these targeted malicious codes, and the next topic is covert channel. So what can be a covert channel? I have written the very few main sections or main points of covert channel over here. Just go through that. It is basically a channel which transfers information that is not supposed to be allowed to happen. Okay, so basically any medium which is not an obvious medium of communication, can be termed as a covert channel. Covert is something hidden, right? So you can say that this is a hidden channel or a hidden medium of communication, which ideally remains undetected by the hardware. Why I'm saying undetected? Because such a medium may be used for any non-malicious kind of activity, and you are using that same medium to carry out your malicious intentional activities. You're getting what I'm trying to say? There is a common path which you use daily to go to college and come back to home. The same path can be used to carry out some illegal activities, and you won't even notice that. Such sort of thing happens using a covert channel, using a path which is otherwise non-malicious, but you are using it to carry out some malicious activities. Now, don't get confused with Trojans. Trojan is a software. Covert channel is not a software. Okay, I guess you might be confused with what is a Trojan then. Trojan is nothing but it is a malicious software which is used to carry out illegal activities through a what you can say through a uh, safe path or a safe method. You're getting what I'm trying to say. Non-malicious path, but carrying a malicious activity is what we call as a Trojan. Similar kind of a concept is used over here, but covert channels are not softwares, where Trojans are software. Is it clear? I will give example of what exactly is a Trojan, what exactly is a covert channel. This is the actual definition of this covert channel, that it transfers information that is not supposed to be allowed to happen. Okay, it is a hidden channel, it is undetected by hardware, and they hide the existence of communication. Now let me get into the various ways by which a covert channel can exist. These are just two examples, small examples I have taken out, okay, to make things clear. Now in Unix there is a command, Unix or Linux, there is a command mkdir. It basically creates directories, if you remember, right? It is used to create directories or make directories. Now what exactly happens is, basically you can say that this is nothing but equal to making folders or creating folders. Now let's take an example. This is a timeline, okay, divided into seconds. Okay, so this is 1 second, this is 2 second, 3 second. I may have given this example in the past also. For example, 20 seconds. And what the attackers do is, basically there are two attackers and they want to communicate with each other through this particular medium, through this particular common storage. Now what do we mean by common storage? For example, I am accessing a computer, college computer, and that particular computer is connected to a college server or a college network. For example, हमारे college का example ले लो, they are having their internal Wi-Fi network. So that particular Wi-Fi network is a common storage. We can say a network storage or a network attached storage, NAS. Okay, so this is a common storage, and anyone having access to a computer, college computer, can access this particular NAS. Obviously, with a password or without a password, it depends upon the authentication. But the gist is that if you are having a shared network access, network attached storage, then any users connected to that particular network can access the storage, right? So just assume that there are two people, there are two attackers. One is Charlie, and the other is Trudy. Okay, so these are the two attackers. These are friends, and they want to communicate with each other. But anyhow, they don't want their communication to be intercepted by any other investigator or security investigator, or you can say a network admin. So what they can do is, they have predetermined that after every 5 seconds or so, you can say that, or after every 3 seconds, what you can do is, they want to communicate a message with each other. For example, this is a message. Okay, this is in terms of binary values. So they want to communicate this message, but they want to use a common shared medium. Why a common shared medium? Because everyone has access to that particular medium. So even Charlie has access to this medium, and even Trudy has access to the medium. So how they can carry out this communication without anyone else noticing their activities? If they open a notepad file in the shared medium, that can be traced. Yes or no? That can be traced by the network administrator, because if they create a notepad file and share this particular piece of information with each other, that can be tracked. Yes or no? That can be tracked, right? So, how they can communicate with each other without even sharing this actual piece of information? Any idea? You got what I'm trying to ask? Charlie and Trudy want to communicate with each other. They are using this shared common storage medium, and they want to share this particular piece of information, that is 1011100001. This might be a very important, a top secret message. Okay, so they don't want to disclose this particular message to the network administrator or the system administrator. So how they can communicate this particular piece of information within each other, within themselves? Any idea? Kindly let me know. Make use of this concept MKDIR if possible. Or if you're having any other ideas, any bright ideas of communicating information, as if you people all might have your own covert channels to communicate with each other, sign languages, etc. So that is very common. So try to apply the same kind of logic over here. Try to create a medium or a covert channel through which Charlie and Trudy can communicate with each other without even any even coming into notice of any system administrator or network administrator. Any example, any idea? Kindly let me know.
Sir, they can actually create a folder or directory that is same as the system sort of a thing. मतलब जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर ज्यादातर नोटिस नहीं करेगा कि ये सिस्टम फाइल है करके इसको निग्लेक्ट कर सकता है.
Okay, then
फिर उसके थ्रू शेयर कर सकते हैं सर. वो लोग मतलब उसके अंदर स्टोर कर सकते हैं कुछ ना कुछ करके.
नहीं, स्टोर करेंगे तो इन्फॉर्मेशन लीक हो जाएगा ना. whenever we are storing something, तो वो इन्फॉर्मेशन लीक नहीं करना है. means I don't want to actually send this value. You're getting what I'm trying to say? I don't want to send this
इंस्ट्रक्शन ऑन कर सकते हैं सर. जैसे रीड होगा वैसे डिलीट हो जाएगा.
हाँ, वैसे ही कुछ करेंगे. कैसे करेंगे?
वो सोचना पड़ेगा सर.
Okay, Rishikesh has sent something, creating temporary file in public directory with a hidden message. Even if we create a hidden message, it can be read by the admin, right? Can we change the default gateway to each other's machine? No, we don't have access to that. We only have access to the common storage. एक particular folder assume करो, a public folder where you can read other files, you can create your own files, but you don't have access to the network settings or anything like that. Steganography, again, if you create a file, it will be suspicious, right? For example, अगर उस particular pathway को image है ही नहीं, and you're creating an image and hiding your data inside that image, again, that can be traced by the admin, right? What I'm trying to say is you can't send these bits of information directly, either through steganography or encryption or whatever. Correct, Vikas. This is what I was trying to come to. They can have an understanding between them when an empty folder means 0 and non-empty folder means 1. Clear. Correct answer. That is what I was expecting. See, that is why I have drawn this timeline. Suppose they have an understanding beforehand that after every 3 seconds, they will check the particular common folder, common storage. And if there is a folder named, whatever named, for example, there is a folder named A at every 3 seconds, they will assume that at that particular point of time, it is presence of 1. Okay, so suppose at 6th second, there is no folder present termed A, it will be assumed as a 0. You're getting what I'm saying? This is a very logical kind of an explanation. The only thing is, Charlie and Trudy should have a common time, a synchronized watch or a synchronized time or a synchronized clock. They have to follow that particular clock. At every third second, I'm just giving an example of a third second. You can extend it to every minute. So at every third second, for example, Charlie will visit this particular common folder. If the folder called A is present, he or she will assume that that is the presence of a 1 bit. Similarly, at 6th second, again Charlie visits that particular folder. If A is not present, he or she will assume that that particular bit is a 0 bit. In the same fashion, after every 3 seconds, they are going to read the same common channel. Okay, and at the end, they will be able to get this entire message without even actually sharing that message. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you all can even think of a system like this and try to create a covert channel to communicate with each other. Technically, I'm talking about, not sign languages and all. Okay, so this was the very first type of a covert channel where we are making use of this command mkdir. It works in Unix and Linux. In Windows also, you can simply create a file folder by right clicking and create a folder, no issues. Just example is all about mkdir. Next is we are having this concept of a Morse code. You might be aware of what exactly is a Morse code, right? So uh, uh, basically, this came into existence when I'm just taking an example. I'm not sure about the name of that particular person. That a person was in jail, and that particular person used to communicate his messages outside the jail with the help of Morse code. For example, Morse code. You know what exactly is Morse code? Dots and dashes, right? Dots and dashes. So these are the things which are used to communicate. But what happens is whenever you're using Morse code uh, in its traditional format, the other person might be able to decrypt it. So what this person did is he wanted to share his information outside the jail. So instead of sending it through a Morse code technique, or even without using any sound signals, what he did is he used to wink. Okay, आँख मारता था. So wink, how wink? If the person used to wink for a small duration, or a single wink means a dot, and a double wink means a dash. So this is how he used to pass on the information to the people outside the jail, obviously with the help of some insider person. So what exactly happened is that person or the criminal had some piece of information and he wanted to share that information to the people outside the jail or to his gang members. So basically, he used to wink once, okay, wink once for dot and wink twice for a dash. So this is how he used to share the information to his gang members. Okay, this is also a technique by which we can create a covert channel. This is not technical, this is a non-technical kind of an example. So I'm just giving you a few examples by which actually these what you can say covert channels can be created, right? Any doubts so far? Kindly let me know. Okay, okay, thank you so much. So let's move to the next topic. Last type of targeted malicious code, which is called as linearization attack. It is quite different. It is not similar to what we have done so far. Kindly have a look at this particular piece of definition. A linearization technique is basically a technique of retrieving the secret message without having the key. You can term this as a brute force kind of an attack where you are not having access to the keys, but even without the key, you are trying to guess what could be the password. Okay, I'm just giving you this particular example. Read this program clearly. Okay, this is a program. If it is clear, okay, try to tell me what exactly is happening in this program, and then we can move forward. Just go through it. Just go through the algorithm. Just go through the pseudocode once, and tell me what exactly is happening in this small snippet of code. Just take 2 minutes, not more than that. Okay, any idea what is happening? I'm not that pro in programming, but still, this is a very simple kind of a code, simple piece of a code.
सर हम लोग आर्ग्यूमेंट में कोई सीरियल सीरियल नंबर दे रहे हैं जिसके बाद में हम लोग इस सीरियल नंबर के साथ कंपेयर कर रहे हैं अगर कहीं पे लाइक यहाँ पे है H123N तो अगर N आ रहा है बीच में तो सीरीज टूट रही है वो 456 नहीं हो रहा है तो वहाँ पे ब्रेक हो जाएगा और डायरेक्ट ब्रेक कर देगा
Okay, so in short, what is happening is any more answers? Jignesh ने answer दिया. Anyone want to add into it? It's checking whether the serial number is right or not. Okay, that is fine. Anything else?
सर
Correct.
आर्क भी है ना मैट्रिक्स है उसमें बहुत सारे सीरियल नंबर्स है आई थिंक सो
Okay. Okay.
तो वो चेक कर रहा है कि ये सीरियल नंबर ये मैट्रिक्स आर्क भी में है कि नहीं
अगर मैच नहीं करता तो वो प्रिंट नहीं करेगा, अगर मैच करता है तो ही वो प्रिंट करेगा।
Correct. Okay. Uh, thanks a lot. काफी correct answers मिले हैं. The exact answer which I was trying to find is Vikas has given the answer. It is matching each of the character one at a time. ये किसी ने बोला नहीं मुझे अब तक. हर एक character एक character at a time is getting matched with the arguments or with the serial. For example, if I've entered something like this, for example, the very first character I have entered is A, right? It is matched with the first character of this serial, right? If both of them match, then I will go ahead. Correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. If it is not matching, what will happen? It will simply move out of the loop. Am I correct? Yes or no? It will match each and every character one by one. If the character is matching, then it will move ahead. If the character is not matching, it will simply move out of the loop. Mentioned over here with the help of this break. So it will simply move out of the loop. Okay. So at the end, what will happen if all the 8 characters are matching exactly? Then only it will be printed that the serial number is so and so, and the serial number is correct. Okay. So now, can anyone tell me how the attacker can exploit such a situation? Can this be exploited? Can we make use of some timing signals? Can we make use of some kind of timer over here? I'm giving a lot of hints. Try to think upon it. Can we make use of timers? Can we make use of something called as a timing signal? We can start a timer at the beginning of this loop and close the timer over here and then take the time in between. Can we do something like that?
Yes, sir. We can here the in the for loop. If condition is being used, then we would try character by character. Such if the for loop, if our control remain the for loop for longer time, then would assume that the encounter character is correct. And
Correct.
this way we would try to crack that password.
Very good. Correct answer. So let me now tell the exact explanation. What exactly happens is the program checks one character at a time and exits as soon as an incorrect character is found. Clear? Itna sab clear ho gaya? Next is the correct password takes longer to process as compared to the incorrect password. This is of utmost importance. Pay attention over here. If you are entering the correct password, it will take long time as compared to the incorrect password. Because agar incorrect hoga, to it will simply move out of the loop. But even if one character, the very first character is correct, it will try to find out the next character. And as a result, what will happen? It will spend more amount of time in matching the various characters present inside the serial array, right? This is what is done. So the attacker tries all the characters for the first position, okay? And whenever, for example, attacker kya karega? Attacker can try with a character capital A, then with a character small a, then with B, small b, and so on. In this way, the attacker will keep on trying with various combinations and keep a note of the timing. Okay, so obviously A ke liye some time will be, for example, 5 seconds, small a ke liye again 4 seconds, nearly about it. Okay, nearly about the same time. But which character will take the longest time? It is S, because my first character is S over here. So for example, S may take a very long time, for example, 9 seconds or 10 seconds. That will be the time which will be the highest. For example, if any incorrect value is encountered, the loop will simply break out. The loop will simply move out of it. But if it is trying to find out the exact character, it will first check whether the character is S. Okay, it is S. Then it will try to compare with 1. Right? So again, it will try to compare the second character. वहां पे अगर match नहीं हुआ, then it will move out of the loop. So it will take more amount of time if the first character is correct. So as a result, what will happen? There will be a timer set. Timer kahan pe hoga? Timer will be just at the beginning of the loop and end of the loop. Okay. So the difference between both the times will tell me the actual execution time. Clear? So this execution time will be read by the attacker, and for the character which is taking the maximum amount of execution time is assumed to be the very first character of my password. Is it clear? That is what is mentioned over here. The attacker finds that the character S takes the longest amount of time, hence the first character must be an S. Clear with this logic? This is how, without even having the key or without even having the knowledge of a password, it can be cracked, right? Just by applying some sort of programming basics to the entire scenario. Clear with this? Then what happens? This attacker then tries to compare with the second character, and the entire process is repeated again. Hence, the attacker can recover the password one character at a time. Clear? Clear with this? Kindly let me know. This is how we can carry out a linearization attack. So I guess there is no protection from it. Is any kind of protection available? Kindly let me know. We can obviously change the programming structure. We can obviously change the algorithm. I would suggest that instead of moving out of the loop, you add some kind of error checking into it, so that the time difference or the time interval between correct and incorrect guesses will be very minimum. So as a result, what will happen? The attacker may not be 100% sure that the character should be an S or a Y or a P or anything else. Okay, so this is just an example of a vulnerable piece of code. The attacker can exploit such a vulnerable piece of code and get access to the system. Clear with this? Any doubts so far? Kindly let me know. Okay, so can I move ahead? Don't be just present physically.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let's move ahead. We have already covered these three targeted malicious codes and the and the various three types. Now I'm going to start with over security. We are having 23 minutes time. So let's start with over security. I'm not sure it will be completed or not. I'm going at my own pace. We'll do it in the next lecture if it's not complete today. So let's start with this particular thing, which is called as operating system security. Now again, it is also having uh, three types or three ways by which we can apply some kind of a security to our operating systems. What are those three types? We can make use of a concept which is called as separation, then comes memory protection, and last, access control. So as explained earlier also, I am going to focus on separation and memory protection. So both of these are very easy. You just have to look into it. Very simple techniques. The very first type is called as separation. Now, what do you mean by separation? It's mentioned over here that separation is nothing but we are separating the objects that can be accessed by various subjects. Now you know what is a subject, what is an object. We have already covered that in Bell LaPadula and Biba models. Subject is the person or the user using that particular file. That particular file is called as an object. Okay, so keeping one user's objects separate from other users' object is termed as separation. You're understanding what I'm saying? Basically, you're creating a divide or creating a boundary such that one particular user can access only those files which he or she is liable to access or which he or she has got access rights for. Okay. Similarly, he or she can't cross that boundary and access any other user's files or any other user's objects. Okay. That can be implemented with the help of these four methods, which are called as physical separation, temporal separation, logical separation, and cryptographic separation. So we're going to do this one by one. The very first is called as physical separation. So what do you mean by physical separation? Any idea?
Separation in which we can act,
Separation in which?
we can play something like we can separate it physical means do something.
Okay, okay. Suppose कोई भी resource लेके example बता सकते हो. Take any resource which can be physically shared. I'm not talking about a computer. A single computer cannot be shared at the same time by many people. So any other resource apart from a computer which can be shared by multiple users. you already have faced this issue. You are having printers, right, in your college. You can't, yeah, servers can be an example, okay. I'm talking about physical thing first, physical separation. That is a hardware separation. I will come to the cloud part, okay. Memory, you can say, okay. For example, I'm taking a very basic example, printers. Whenever you face these situations where you have to take a lot of printers at the same time, you see what exactly happens, right? A huge queue forms for taking printouts. But that can be avoided if we spend some more amount and get multiple printers. Okay, multiple printers से क्या होगा? Multiple printers will actually deviate the traffic among the multiple resources. So many people can access the various resources at the same time. So what we are doing is we are sharing our physical resources. For example, I have five user. For example, I have five printers and I have 20 users. So I am separating each printer for 4 users. Otherwise, what would have happened? A single printer would have to be shared between those 20 users, and that would have unnecessarily created a lot of issues in terms of waiting time and all. So that can be avoided with the help of sharing multiple hardware among the users by increasing the count of those hardwares. Clear? Now I'm coming back to the partitions. Okay, memory partitioning can be done, correct, in which each and every user will be having its separate share of memory. For example, I'm taking a very basic example. I'm restricting the C drive, restricting the C drive for the operating system, E drive for music, F drive for games, and so on. So what I'm trying is I am basically dividing the entire physical hard disk among multiple users and restricting the access of each users on those particular partitions of disks. Clear? This is what we call as a physical separation. Is it clear? Similarly, next up is temporal separation. Temporal is anything in terms with time. Okay, so when the single when the single system is shared among multiple users at different intervals of time, we call this a temporal separation. For example, in our if we go back 10, 12 years, okay, in time, we used to have the concept of cyber cafes. अभी तो cyber cafes बहुत obsolete हो चुके, कोई access ही नहीं करता है. We actually use cyber cafes by paying 30 rupees for an hour, 20 rupees for half an hour, and so on. So what exactly we were doing that time? We used to play games also in those cyber cafes, but at the same rate of 30 per hour, 50 per hour, depends on that. So basically, what we used to do is we used to access the resources for a particular amount of time. We are booking our slot that between 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. I will be using those resources. So the owner used to give the access of that particular resource dedicated to me only, right? You are understanding what I'm trying to say? Basically, we are sharing the time in this case. The resources are getting shared among multiple users based on some criteria, which is called as time. That is what we call as temporal separation. So, for example, the same C drive could be used by user A for 30 minutes of time. Same C drive can be used by user B for 70 minutes of time. Because, for example, the user B might be having a high priority task which requires a lot of time from the C drive. That's why the OS will dedicate 70 minutes to user B and 30 minutes to user A, and so on. That is what we call as temporal separation. Is it clear? I'm just trying to take out real life examples to make things interesting and understandable. Okay. Next is logical separation. What do you mean by logical separation? Logical separation is the same thing. You are virtually separating the actual physical software. You might have heard about the term virtualization. Virtualization is nothing but you're having a hardware, but you're creating virtual units of the same hardware which can be shared among multiple users. So what is happening? Multiple users can access the same physical hardware using their own share of virtual units or logical units. Using that logical unit, I can access multiple resources at the same time. For example, your virtual operating systems. I can run a virtual OS. I can run multiple virtual OS on my machine, provided I have ample amount of RAM dedicated to it. I can run Kali Linux OS. I can run Ubuntu OS on my actual host, provided I have multiple slots for RAMs or I have ample amount of RAM to be dedicated among those virtual softwares. Clear? So basically, I'm using the same resource. For example, I'm having 16 GB of RAM. I'm dividing those 16 GB into those 3 virtual operating systems. One for my actual host, and one for Linux.
Sir,
One
your
for
voice is breaking.
voice is breaking. Okay, kindly let me know what about others. Is it audible?
No, sir, it's fine.
Sir, it's fine. Audible.
Okay, okay. I guess there's some network issue. Okay. Okay, so what I was trying to say is basically you are dividing those 16 GB of RAM into multiple OSs. It can be one of the physical hosts which you are using. For example, I'm using Windows 10 and I can run multiple OS inside either a virtual box, Oracle virtual box, or VMware, or whatever you are used to. So basically, the physical hardware is getting divided into virtual chunks, and those chunks can run separately at the same time. This is what we call as logical separation. Clear? And finally, we are left with cryptographic separation. This is very much used in real life. What you can say is you are having the same software, you are having the same piece of document present in your machine, but you are encrypting that piece of software with a key which only you have access to. So what you are doing is you are providing some kind of a security in form of encryption so that only you or the people who are having the key which you might have shared with them can access that particular file. No one else other than the people who are having access to the key can open or read that particular file. This is very much used in real times because it doesn't need any extra hardware as in case of this, because in physical separation we need to replicate our hardware. So that problem is not present over here. That is being solved. Similarly, you don't need any concept of a temporal separation because you don't need to wait 30 minutes for user A to complete its process and then you can start your process. You can work at any time provided you have access to the encryption key. Okay. Similarly, logical separation. Logical separation and cryptographic separation, in fact, doesn't have any coinciding activities because logical separation can work on its own sandbox kind of an environment. So I would say that out of these four methods, logical separation and cryptographic separation are the best ones because you can have multiple systems running at the same time. The only drawback of logical separation is you need high resources because if you want to share your entire resource with two or three operating systems, you would require a high supply of resource or high bandwidth. So the best of all these four would be cryptographic separation, provided you have a strong encryption system installed on your machine. Otherwise, the as you know, the entire weak link is all about this, all about the key which you are using, or it's all about the encryption algorithm which you are using. If you are using double DES, you know what are the consequences of using double DES. Any script kiddie can even break into a double DES kind of an algorithm. So it's really very difficult. It's really very easy to break into those encryption technologies with the help of some random guessing or brute force. So if you are thinking of using this cryptographic separation technique to protect your operating system, then you should obviously employ a very good encryption technique, either RSA or you can go with AES 256. Okay. Right now, 256 is being used commercially. 512 is also not used commercially right now, but it's in the process of patenting. And after that, you can use AES 512 commercially. Few of the organizations are using that, but again, it depends whether they are able to pay a huge amount of money or not. Other than that, AES 256 is more than enough for your common day-to-day activities or even securing your machines against ransomwares. Okay, so this was all about this was all about the very first operating system security mechanism. Let me drop in the attendance link and then I will start with these topics. Okay, I'm just giving you an intro of this particular thing. What exactly is memory and address protection? And I will start in detail in the next lecture. We are going to discuss about a concept called as fencing. Fencing is like a hardware fence, which actually protects the data present inside. Can we consider Bob and Alice experiment as? Yes, we can consider. No issues. You can consider any example you wish. Okay, just stick with the technical definition. That's it. So now this is what we are going to study is we are studying the various ways by which we can protect our memory and address of the OS. As you know, you already are aware of what is buffer overflow, right? So buffer overflow is basically the overflow of extra characters into some random memory locations. So what basically happens is if any malicious user is carrying out any malicious activity, that extra space can be exploited to send any malicious piece of code. So to avoid something like that, we can make use of these memory and address protection mechanisms. The very first type is fencing. You already know what is a fence. A fence protects all the resources present inside a particular perimeter or a boundary. So that same concept we are going to apply over here in fencing. I will explain about what exactly are these in the next lecture. Similarly, relocation. Now you all know that whenever you're writing a program, it is not necessary that the program will always be stored at the very first memory address location. Correct? That particular file could be stored in any random memory allocation wherever the memory is free, and the entire process will begin from that particular memory location. So we need to have some relocation unit or some offset. Offset is basically the address which will be added to the very first address of my program. For example, my program is beginning for example, my offset address is 1000 and my program requires 3 memory locations, then the actual address of my program won't be 0, 1, and 2. It will be 1001, 1002, and 1003 because till 1000 the memory is occupied. So after 1000, the 3 locations would be relocated. So this is how the second method relocation is used. Similarly, we are going to read about another method which is called as base bound register. We'll come to that. It will be clear once you are aware of what is fence and what is relocation. You are already aware of segmentation and paging. So I would request you to kindly go through segmentation and paging if you're having access to your OS lectures or if you're having some notes, or you can even visit online. Okay. Just revise it once again so that it will be very easy for you whenever we start with these topics in the next lecture. Okay. So that's it for today. So kindly give me your feedbacks, and if you're having any doubts, you could simply ask me. I'm still having 5 minutes. If you're having any doubts, you can ask me.